A common way of making a game more appealing to audiences is to create a sense of immersion. Immersion isn't something that can be simply added to a game on a whim. Many small details come together to form an immersive experience for the player. Allow me to give you an example. Hollow Knight is a 2D Metroidvania often acclaimed for its world building. The sense of immersion one experiences when playing Hollow Knight can be largely attributed to an almost addictive urge to explore its large sprawling world. After all, you wouldn't want to explore a boring world, or an extremely confined world, right? Part of what makes the world feel so real and immersive in Hollow Knight is that all of its environments have great art and sound design. What I've just said might sound like common sense, but prioritizing and keeping the idea of immersion in mind while creating environments and art for a game is a surefire way to improve the immersiveness of that game. So in this video, I'll be trying my best to create an immersive atmosphere in my Metroidvania sewer oasis. I figured the best way to do this was to add a new area to our game. The start of the video might have given it away, but we will be adding a swamp area to our game. To start off, I created a new tiled project for our swamp area. Next, I added some auto tiling rules and created a basic scene. Everything was set up now, using TOML files to link assets and define some of the resources the area would use, and after modifying some save data, our starting scene was complete. The scene currently feels kind of empty, so the first thing I want to do is add a series of parallel backgrounds to make our scene look less 2D. So I booted up Photoshop and started drawing the background and foreground for the scene. It was a bit difficult as it had been a while since I drew pixel art in this style. I don't really draw a lot of backgrounds in the first place, but we eventually had some decent backgrounds. After exporting the layers as PNG files and adding them to our scene, I decided to add some grass to our scene. I drew this grass tile in Sprite. If you look closer, you might notice that I actually divided the tile up into 4 sections, each containing a blade of grass. By using a texture atlas, which in simple terms just shows part of an image, I was able to randomly place these 4 blades of grass for each grass tile. This avoids making the grass look too uniform and also helps me create good looking grass in scenes without too much effort. To make the grass interactive, I made all of my physics objects apply a force based on their velocity to each of the individual blades of grass. Another upside of using a texture atlas for each blade of grass is that I was able to apply forces to each individual blade of grass instead of the entire tile. This seems a lot more realistic and satisfying in my opinion. Since my custom physics system already gives me information on what index the possible tiles which could collide with a physics object are in, I simply took that information and checked if the blades of grass within that tile intersected with our object's collision box. If they did, we would apply a force accordingly depending on how fast the colliding object was moving in the horizontal axis. When there were no forces being applied to the grass, I simply made it restore back to its original state. The nice thing about making the environment based on physics objects is that enemies such as the spider that I had created a while ago can also affect the grass simply because they also contain a physics object component. The scene still seems kind of static. After staring blankly at my screen for a bit, I realized why. When taking your hands off the keyboard, this game suddenly reverts to what seems like a still image. It didn't feel real due to the stiffness of the scene, so I set off to solve this problem. The first thing that was unrealistic is that the grass wouldn't be affected by external forces such as wind, so I simply added an additional force which would be applied randomly with the strength that I specified for each area in our TOML files. The scene does look more dynamic now and the grass does seem a lot more realistic, but it's still not quite enough. Throughout this short portion of the video, it might not seem like I've changed much of the core game, as I've not really added many new features. But even in this absence of posting, I've actually been making the process of creating new systems much more efficient and robust, through implementations such as storing data in TOML files instead of hardcoding. In the long run, I know this will be better for my game than rushing through lots of areas and making horrid gameplay. Coincidentally, one of the systems I've improved on was my particle system, and I've in fact completely revamped the particle effect workflow. To show that off, I'd like to make some rainfall in this scene, as it would make the scene more dynamic, while also giving me some practice with the new workflow. The basic idea behind the effect was that rain would fall from the top of a scene, and each time a rain droplet despawned, it would leave behind a splash. Since the system was more advanced now, I could actually control many aspects of the system, such as what occurred when the particle was to despawn. So this was relatively easy to do. Additionally, I was able to optimize the performance of this system by only spawning the splash effect if the particle despawned within the frustum of the camera. Thus, I was able to save a lot of computing power by drastically reducing the amount of particles spawned by the system. Since we already added rain, I decided to make the environment even livelier and add some animals that run away when you get near them. I decided to make a frog-rabbit hybrid because I thought it would fit the theme of a swamp. But my inspiration was actually these birds in Hollow Knight, which fly away when you get near them. You can also kill them if you're fast enough, which I think is another nice immersive touch in Hollow Knight. Obviously, I'm not going to get into that much depth with my environments yet, but it is definitely something to think about in the future when my game has gotten more developed. To actually add the animal into my scene, I created a new enemy type. As I mentioned before, my workflow for actually creating systems in the game was a lot more fluid now, so it was a lot easier to implement than it would have been in an earlier build of the game. Instead of flying away like in Hollow Knight, I set a timer and made the rabbits hop away and burrow after a certain period of time. Due to how streamlined my systems all were, I was also able to very easily add a particle system whenever the rabbits hopped or burrowed. Alright, I've been warned many times to not add polish too early, so I think I've hit a decent benchmark where I can start implementing more essential parts of the game. While it might still count as polish, I decided to add sound to the game. A game can't really be a proper game without at least some minimalistic sound design, and a Metroidvania definitely can't be immersive unless it has sound. So sound takes priority over any more visual polish. Furthermore, if I'm going to release the game at some point, I really need to gain some experience with sound design. The first thing I went about making a sound for was the rain, which was actually quite easy to do. I started off with some white noise, and after using some EQ filter and some other effects, I was able to create a decent rain ambience. Then I just made the droplets play a sound whenever they despawn within view of the player, and our rain ambience effect was sounding pretty decent. When we walk through grass, it should also make a rustling sound. So I just smashed some Kleenex together and successfully created a rustling sound. Finally, I copied some old sounds over from my previous C# iteration of the project for our melee attack, and with that, the first iteration of sound effects for our game was complete. Alright, all the systems have been set up, so all we have to do is create more of the area. I hope you guys enjoyed the 5th devlog of Sewer Oasis. I'm really excited to work on this game now as I have a lot of core systems set up at this point, so we can focus on the fun stuff moving forward. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see everyone next time.